refocusing of the power sector stemmed from the full implementation of electric power sector being tackled from all fronts as part of conscious efforts of government to ensure that frustration experienced in the sector over the past decades does not undermine government's intention to bring an end to the nation's stunted growth. Mr. President's launch of the Roadmap for Power Sector Reform expectedly triggered the significant progress being witnessed in fast-tracking structural reforms aimed at removing obstacles to private sector investment in the power sector. This is with a view to returning to the task of pursuing the fundamental changes to the ownership, control, and regulation of the sector that have been outlined in the National Electric Power Policy of 2002, enriched in the Electric Power Sector Reform EPSR Act of 2005. The task ahead is enormous, but achievable.
Well, it's so critical to make sure that everything is on course with regard to the entire value chain of power delivery. So what we did, so many people are really rejoicing that there has been, like you said, appreciable improvement in power supply, was to have a very highly technical, proficient management of the grid. That made sure that some of the bottlenecks we used to have in the past have been addressed. And in addition, we are embarking upon a project. We don't really want to make it very public now, but we want people to see the results and rejoice with us instead of announcing ahead of time all that we're doing. But we have a project going on now, which we call Operation Electrify Nigeria. And sometimes we call it Operation Light Up Nigeria. And that is going to even further improve power delivery to the grassroots in Nigeria. So one of the key things we've done is, instead of complaining about generation capacity and so on, to go down to the grid and make sure that every generated megawatt is very well taken care of, losses minimized, and maximum delivery given to Nigerians. So that's why people are rejoicing all over. And we are replacing a lot of those bad transformers. Literally, I can say that we have more than 1,000 of them that are very bad and outside there. So we are trying to replace as many of them as possible. And we are getting there. It's not yet Uhuru, as you said, but yes, we are getting very close to that.
The mission to provide the nation with adequate and reliable power supply by implementing generation, transmission, and distribution projects kick-started with the rehabilitation of power stations and power terminal stations. These include Kainji, Jebba, and Egbin power stations. Additional power stations have been completed, while others are at the verge of completion. These power stations are gradually being commissioned by President Goodluck Jonathan.
With electricity generation and distribution now in the hands of the private sector operators, power transmission is on full course. I'm confident that in the very near future, the present epileptic power situation, which is a major stumbling block to the rapid growth of our economy, will give way to noticeable improvement in terms of electric delivery and other services. Let me remind you again, of course, also the Minister of Power mentioned that this new set of energy projects that we are commissioning between now and the first quarter of next year will also be privatized. Government will not continue to lend around them. To conclude, I would like to especially thank His Excellency, the Governor of Kogi State, Idris Wada, and all our royal fathers and my good people of Kogi for the environment, the conducive environment provided for these power plants to go on. Equally deserving of our special commendation are the governors of the 36 states of the Federation, because if they did not cooperate with us, what we are doing here wouldn't have been possible. Their unwavering support and cooperation with the federal government made the NIPP project possible. On behalf of the government and the people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we thank the governors very, very sincerely. But today we are happy to commission the good thing too. We are doing this for our youth to the glory of God. Amen.
We are pleased that the private sector players have sustained enthusiasm in the sector, and of course we have the confidence that they will perform. They also believe in the government, and of course that's why they have invested about $3 billion in this sector. $3 billion is no small money. So both government and the private sector players are totally committed to the success of the power sector in this country. To support the ongoing process, the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, what we call the NIBET, the off-taker, has been provided with capitalization of over $750 million, positioning it to effectively execute its mandate without the apprehension of financial constraints. Arrangements are also underway to adequately fund the Nigerian Electricity Liability Company, what we call the NEMCO, to effectively assume liability associated with the privatization of the PACN successor companies, as well as other liabilities and related issues. Things can only get better. We cannot go back again. Whenever I'm asked about power, what are you generating? I used to tell people that don't forget about installed capacity, forget about what we are generating. Because even if I mention what we are generating, if you cannot transmit it to the consumers, then of course the generation means nothing. Our interest is how we stabilize light, and we promise that before the middle of next year, light will be reasonably, I'm not saying total, reasonably stabilized in this country.
Most of these power stations are connected to the national grid, resulting in the injection of more megawatts to the grid and an appreciable level of improvement in the power supply in most parts of Nigeria.
Kainji went through some upgrading and repairs with support from the World Bank. Jeba went through some upgrading and repairs with support from Japanese International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Then the other plants, our plants in Sapele, went through some upgrading. And Igbin and most of the other plants, we've been trying to restore the capacity, of the generation capacity. So that has helped considerably to bring about some increase. Ugeli has gone through some additional work that has taken place in Ugeli, Igbin, Sapele. And in addition to that, we also have some of the NIPP projects, one or two, that have joined the stream. Omotosho, for example, has come on. So these have added some additional capacity to increase the amount of electricity that is available. That has helped in a considerable way to increase the amount of power that we've seen in this.
The Ministry of Power is intensifying efforts in implementing the roadmap of the power sector reform with a review in recognition of the new developments under the reform and to align it more accurately with the needs of the reform, its managers, the power sector, and various stakeholders, including the Nigeria people. The federal government began the process of privatizing some sections of the power value chain, resulting in the sourcing of credible private sector companies through bidding based on a core investor sale of a minimum of 51% of the government equity in the companies.
The process has actually started, and we are very happy that that process has taken off. And then, in addition to that, we want to make sure that all the PSCN workers are fully paid, not only their regular severance packages, but also their pensions packages are credited to their PFAs before we now physically hand over. And NERC is working very hard to make sure that we have some interim rules and regulations that will now guide this market before the minister now declares the transition electricity market. That will be done several weeks from now.
We've had a situation where the power sector was in the hands of government. In fact, it's amazing the courage that Mr. President had to take this decision. It must have been a difficult decision to say the entire electricity system of the country, just like banking. Let me tell you what will happen. Power will be produced and traded as they are doing in telecommunications now. Government like this year is zero allocation for discos and gencos. Zero. Government money is no longer, the billions and billions that are voted every year to NEPA and to PSCN will no longer be there. The billions and billions going to payment of workers will no longer be there. It will now be something that is private sector. So, a lot of jobs will be created because many engineers, many other professions will be employed to come in. Services will improve. If a man has bought, for example, Kainji or concession, because the hydros were not sold, the hydros were concessioned, Kainji, Jeba, and Shiroro, he will bring in new turbines. I give you, for example, Kainji. Kainji is not producing up to half of what is there. But the new owners we know have a plan to keep it optimal. So things will improve. Let us give government a chance. Let's give the new owners a chance.
Conscious of the need for complementary reforms in the upstream fuel-to-power sector and in the gas industry in particular, significant reforms of the gas industry have already taken place in the past 12 months. These reforms have direct and positive impact on the electricity industry, hence the introduction of additional incentives to attract tens of billions of dollars of private sector capital, which the industry will require over the coming decades. But government has to contend with the nefarious activities of vandals who sabotage its efforts.
The sabotage is coming from very ugly, wicked, and bad Nigerians. People who will go to vandalize the gas pipelines. It's difficult to believe that an individual will go to blow up a gas pipeline that supply, because most of these plants are gas fired. They need the gas. So somebody